What if I told you that your dissatisfaction with where you live has almost nothing to do with the place itself? You see, we've convinced ourselves that the problem lies in our surroundings. Too noisy, too quiet, too crowded, too isolated. But here's the thing. The real conflict isn't between you and your environment. It's within you. Think about it. You carry your perception everywhere you go, like a filter through which you experience the world. A man I once knew spent his life chasing the perfect location, only to discover that his unease traveled with him like a shadow. What if the place you're seeking isn't a place at all, but a state of being that you've forgotten how to access? We've all done this at some point, blamed the city for our restlessness, blamed the suburbs for our boredom, blamed the countryside for our isolation. We look around at our surroundings and think, this is the problem. This place is draining my energy. This neighborhood is holding me back. This town doesn't understand me. And so we dream of escape. We scroll through photos of distant locations, imagining how different life would be there, how much better we would feel, how much more alive we would become. Have you ever noticed how quickly the excitement of a new place fades? The phenomenon is so common that we've given it a name: the honeymoon phase. At first, everything is fresh and stimulating. The unfamiliar architecture, the new walking paths, the different quality of light. But inevitably, the novelty wears off. The extraordinary becomes ordinary. And those same feelings of dissatisfaction begin to creep back in. The same restlessness. The same sense that something fundamental is missing. You see, we are tremendously skilled at convincing ourselves that our unhappiness is situational rather than perceptual, that it comes from outside rather than inside. And there's something comforting about this belief. Because if the problem is external, the solution must be external too. Move to a new house. Relocate to a different city. Find the right environment, and everything will fall into place. It's a seductive idea, but it's also an idea that keeps us trapped in an endless cycle of momentary hope, followed by inevitable disappointment. Let me tell you something about the nature of our discontent. It rarely stays in one place. It moves. It shapeshifts. When we're at work, we long to be home. When we're home, we dream of being elsewhere. On vacation, after the initial thrill subsides, we start thinking about the next destination. The mind is restless. It craves novelty. It convinces us that what we're seeking is just over there, beyond the horizon, and we believe it, again and again and again. A woman I once knew moved 17 times in 20 years, from apartments to houses, from cities to rural retreats, from mountains to coastlines. Each move was undertaken with absolute certainty that this place, finally, would be the one where she felt at home, where she belonged, where her life would come together. But with each relocation, the pattern repeated itself. Initial excitement, gradual disillusionment, growing restlessness, and finally, the conviction that the next place would be different, that the next place would fulfill what this one had promised, but failed to deliver. Think about it. How much energy do we invest in changing our external circumstances while our internal landscape remains unexamined? We'll uproot our entire lives, leave friends and community behind, abandon the familiar, all in pursuit of a feeling that we believe exists somewhere else, in another city, another country, another climate. And sometimes a change of scenery does help. Sometimes it does refresh our perspective. But the effect is usually temporary because we bring ourselves with us wherever we go. Like a fish swimming in water, we're immersed in our own consciousness. It surrounds us completely. It colors everything we experience. Yet we're often unaware of its presence, its influence, its fundamental role in shaping how we perceive the world. We don't see the water we swim in. We don't recognize how our thoughts, beliefs, expectations, and patterns of attention create the reality we inhabit. Instead, we attribute our experience to external factors, to circumstances, to locations, to the particular arrangement of our physical environment. But here's the thing about perception. It's not passive. It's not simply receiving what's out there. It's an active process of creation. We are constantly interpreting, evaluating, comparing, judging. We focus on certain aspects of our environment while filtering out others. We project our past experiences onto present circumstances. We anticipate future outcomes based on previous patterns. All of this happens largely outside our conscious awareness, and it profoundly shapes how we experience where we live. Now, I'm not saying that your physical environment has no impact on your well-being. Of course it does. Some places are objectively more conducive to human flourishing than others. Clean air matters. Access to nature matters. Safety matters. Community matters. But what I am suggesting is that these external factors often play a much smaller role in our contentment than we imagine, and that our inner relationship with our surroundings is far more significant than the surroundings themselves. What if the real source of your dissatisfaction isn't your apartment or your neighborhood or your city? What if it's the way you've learned to relate to where you are, the expectations you bring to it, the comparisons you make, the aspects you focus on versus those you ignore? What if your discontent has less to do with the place itself and more to do with your inability to be fully present within it? To accept it as it is, rather than wishing it were something else. This is not about resignation or settling. It's about recognition. Recognizing the role that perception plays in our experience of place. Recognizing how our minds create dissatisfaction by constantly reaching for what isn't here. Recognizing that perhaps what we're really seeking isn't a different location, but a different way of seeing, a different way of being wherever we happen to be. Now let's explore the 4 illusions that keep us believing the problem is out there rather than in here. 4 fundamental misconceptions about the relationship between place and contentment that lead us down the path of perpetual seeking and perpetual disappointment. Understanding these illusions won't necessarily change your circumstances, but it might change how you experience them. And ultimately, that could make all the difference. Let me share with you the 4 fundamental illusions that keep us perpetually dissatisfied with where we live. 4 misconceptions about the relationship between place and contentment that lead us down an endless path of seeking. 4 ways we misunderstand the nature of our own experience and project our internal states onto our external environment. The illusion of elsewhere. The persistent belief that happiness exists somewhere other than here. In another neighborhood, another city, another country. We become convinced that the quality we seek, whether it's peace or excitement or inspiration or belonging, resides specifically in a location where we are not. This belief is so seductive because it contains a partial truth. Some environments do resonate more with our nature than others, but the illusion lies in thinking that what we seek can only be found elsewhere, never where we already are. We tell ourselves, once I live there, then I'll be content. Once I escape this place, then I'll flourish. Once I find the right environment, then my real life can begin. Notice how happiness always exists in a hypothetical future, never in the present moment. Notice how it always requires a change of scenery, never a change in perception. We search, and we search, and we search for the place that will finally allow us to stop searching. Yet no matter where we go, the searching continues. Where in your life are you waiting for a change of scenery before allowing joy? What experiences are you postponing until you reach the right destination? What if the very quality you're seeking elsewhere is available right here, hidden in plain sight, waiting only for a shift in your attention to reveal itself? You see, the mind is masterful at creating distance between ourselves and contentment. It places what we seek just beyond our reach, always over the next horizon. And in doing so, it ensures that we never fully arrive where we are. We never fully inhabit our current circumstances. We live in a perpetual state of mental elsewhere, while our physical body remains here. Is it any wonder that we feel disconnected from our surroundings? The illusion of circumstances. The conviction that external conditions determine internal peace. That our state of mind is primarily a product of our environment rather than our relationship to it. This illusion leads us to believe that if we could just get the conditions right, everything else would naturally fall into place. The right view from our window, the right amount of space, the right amenities, the right neighbors, the right climate. But here's the thing about circumstances. They're constantly changing. The quiet neighborhood becomes noisy. The affordable city becomes expensive. The close-knit community disperses. The perfect weather pattern shifts. And even when circumstances remain relatively stable, our relationship to them doesn't. What delighted us yesterday irritates us today. What we once found charming, we now find cloying. The mind habituates. It takes the extraordinary for granted. It finds flaws in paradise. What if the perfect place existed and you moved there tomorrow? How long before you started noticing its imperfections? How long before the exceptional became ordinary? How long before you began to wonder if somewhere else might be even better? Think about it. We can be physically present in the most beautiful surroundings and mentally absent, lost in thoughts of the past or future. Conversely, we can be in objectively challenging environments and experience moments of profound peace or joy. Our external circumstances and our internal experience often have a much looser relationship than we imagine. They can even seem to operate independently, as though existing in parallel universes. The illusion of permanence. The expectation that the right place will create lasting satisfaction. That once we find it, our search will be over. Our restlessness will cease. Our longing will be fulfilled once and for all. This illusion fails to recognize both the changing nature of environments and the changing nature of ourselves. Places transform, cities evolve, neighborhoods transition, natural landscapes alter. Nothing remains exactly as it was, and neither do we. Our needs shift, our preferences evolve. What suited us perfectly at one stage of life may feel constricting at another. The vibrant urban center that energized us in our 20s might exhaust us in our 40s. The quiet retreat that nourished us during one phase might bore us during another. We seek permanent solutions to impermanent conditions. We try to solve an ongoing, evolving relationship with static, one-time decisions. Move here, buy this house, problem solved, forever. But life doesn't work that way. It flows, it changes. It requires continual adaptation and response. Not a single choice, but an ongoing series of choices about how to relate to where we are right now. How might your experience change if you stopped seeking the perfect place and started cultivating the capacity to adapt to and appreciate a variety of places. What if contentment came not from finding the ideal static environment, but from developing a dynamic, responsive relationship with your surroundings, whatever they happen to be? The illusion of separation. The fundamental misconception that we are separate from our environment, that there exists a clear boundary between the person who perceives and the place that is perceived. In reality, we are in constant exchange with our surroundings. The air in the room becomes the air in our lungs. The food from the local environment becomes our body. The sights, sounds, and sensations of a place shape our thoughts, feelings, and memories. We are not discrete entities moving through environments, but participants in a continuous field of experience. We don't just live in places, we live as places. Our identity, our sense of self, is intimately interwoven with where we are and have been. The environments we inhabit become part of us, just as we become part of them. This illusion of separation leads to an adversarial relationship with our surroundings. It's me versus my environment, my preferences against this place's limitations, my needs in conflict with these circumstances. But what if there is no fundamental division? What if your dissatisfaction with where you live is not a problem to be solved, but a relationship to be healed? Now you might be thinking, this all sounds very philosophical, but I still don't like where I live. I still feel trapped, constrained, uninspired by my surroundings. I understand. These illusions are deeply ingrained in our thinking. They feel like common sense, like obvious truth, and seeing through them doesn't immediately transform our experience. But it does begin to loosen their hold on us. It does create space for a different kind of relationship with place to emerge. The question isn't whether these illusions affect you. We're all subject to them to varying degrees. The question is whether you can recognize them as illusions rather than taking them as accurate reflections of reality. Can you catch yourself in the act of believing that happiness exists elsewhere, that your circumstances determine your peace, that the right place will provide lasting satisfaction, that you are fundamentally separate from your environment? Because in that recognition, in that moment of seeing, something shifts. A door opens to a different way of experiencing where you are. Not through the filter of where you wish you were instead, but directly, immediately, as it actually is. With all its complexity, its beauty, its challenges, its gifts. Let's explore each of these illusions more deeply to understand how they operate and how we might begin to free ourselves from their grasp. Let's explore these illusions more deeply, beginning with the illusion of elsewhere. Eastern philosophy has long recognized this tendency of the human mind to locate happiness somewhere other than the present moment, in some place other than where we currently stand. The Buddha spoke of desire as the root of suffering, this persistent reaching for what is not here. And in many ways, our geographic restlessness is simply another manifestation of this fundamental human condition. We believe that peace, fulfillment, contentment exist in a location we have yet to reach. A man I once knew spent nearly 20 years circumnavigating the globe. He lived in 30 countries across 6 continents, remote islands, bustling capitals, ancient villages, modern metropolises. Each move was undertaken with the conviction that the next place would finally provide the sense of belonging he sought, that the next culture would resonate with his true nature in a way the previous one had not, that the next landscape would at last feel like home. But something interesting happened after 2 decades of searching. He began to realize that while some places did indeed feel more aligned with his temperament than others, no location could provide the deep sense of rightness he was seeking. The feeling he was chasing wasn't out there in the physical world. It was a quality of awareness, a way of being present to his experience, a capacity for receptivity and appreciation that had nothing to do with coordinates on a map. You see, the great paradox of elsewhere is that it ceases to be elsewhere the moment we arrive. It becomes here. And if we haven't learned how to be here, how to inhabit the present moment fully, then no change of location will help. The dissatisfaction travels with us. The sense of something missing persists. The habit of placing happiness just beyond the horizon continues. We remain perpetual travelers, never arriving, always en route to the next destination where we believe our real life awaits. Think about it. Can any physical location, no matter how beautiful or harmonious, satisfy what is essentially a spiritual longing? This longing to be fully at home in our experience? To be at peace with what is? To feel connected, alive, present? These are not qualities we find in places. They are qualities we bring to places through our way of seeing, our way of being. Now let's turn to the illusion of circumstances. Zen teaches us about non-attachment to conditions, about finding freedom not by controlling our external environment, but by changing our relationship to it. This doesn't mean accepting harmful situations or remaining in truly toxic environments. It means recognizing the difference between circumstances that are actually detrimental to well-being and circumstances that simply don't match our preferences or expectations. Consider the countless examples of people who find profound contentment in objectively difficult conditions. The monk in a sparse cell who experiences greater peace than the millionaire in a mansion. The family in a modest apartment who create more joy and connection than their neighbors in spacious homes. The traveler who feels more alive in a simple hut than in a luxury resort. These aren't romanticized exceptions. They're illustrations of a fundamental truth. Our experience of place is primarily internal. Conversely, think of those who seem to have the perfect external circumstances yet remain perpetually dissatisfied. The right address, the right view, the right amenities. Everything society tells us should create happiness. Yet inside, the experience is one of emptiness, restlessness, or discontent. No amount of perfecting the environment seems to touch this internal state. It persists regardless of the surroundings, suggesting that its source lies elsewhere. Our internal states are like weather patterns that we project onto the landscape of our lives. We experience a feeling of gloom and assume it's caused by our dreary apartment. We feel a sense of constriction and blame our crowded city. We experience anxiety and attribute it to our isolated location. But what if these internal weather patterns are arising primarily from within, conditioned by countless factors that have little to do with where we physically reside? This isn't to deny the real impact environments have on our well-being. It's to question the disproportionate role we assign them in our pursuit of contentment. It's to recognize that mastering our internal environment might be far more significant than perfecting our external one. That learning to work skillfully with our own minds might be more transformative than finding the ideal place to live. Regarding the illusion of permanence, Buddhist philosophy offers profound insights. The concept of anicca or impermanence reminds us that nothing remains unchanged. Everything is in flux. Everything arises and passes away. This applies not only to physical environments, which are constantly transforming, but also to our own needs, preferences, and perceptions, which evolve throughout our lives. Like the seasons of the year, our relationship with place moves through natural cycles. What nourishes us in one season may not serve us in another. The vibrant social connections of a city that energize us during one phase might overwhelm us during another. The peaceful solitude of a rural setting that restores us at one time might isolate us at another. There is no perfect permanent place because both places and people are impermanent by nature. Yet we continue to seek lasting satisfaction in changing environments. We invest enormous resources, emotional and financial, in finding the right location, as though solving this single variable will permanently resolve our relationship with place. But this approach fundamentally misunderstands the dynamic nature of this relationship. It's not a problem to be solved once and for all. It's an ongoing dialogue, a continuous adjustment, a dance between our evolving selves and our evolving surroundings. The spiritual insight here is profound. Perhaps peace is found not in the absence of change, but in the midst of it. Not in reaching a final, perfect destination, but in learning to move gracefully with the flow of life. Not in controlling our environment, but in developing the internal resources to respond wisely to whatever environment we find ourselves in. This doesn't mean we never make changes to our surroundings. It means those changes come from a place of wisdom rather than a place of illusion. Finally, let's examine the illusion of separation. Non-dualistic philosophical traditions, from Advaita Vedanta to Taoism, show us that the boundary between self and environment is largely artificial. We are not separate entities observing our surroundings from a distance. We are participants in a unified field of experience. The air, the light, the sounds, the energies of a place flow through us, shape us, become part of our physical and psychological makeup. Our perception doesn't merely observe place, it creates our experience of place. Two people in identical physical environments can have radically different experiences depending on what they notice, what they value, what meaning they assign to various aspects of their surroundings. One sees beauty, opportunity, and connection, where another sees only ugliness, limitation, and isolation. Same place, different worlds. In this sense, the mind is the true home we inhabit regardless of physical location. It's the lens through which we experience every place we ever live. And if that lens is clouded by habitual dissatisfaction, persistent craving for elsewhere, or inability to be present, then no change of scenery will clear our vision. We'll continue to see through the same distorted filter, only with different content. This leads us to a paradoxical truth. We cannot escape ourselves by changing locations. Wherever we go, there we are, with all our patterns, tendencies, and ways of seeing. Geographic cure is largely a myth, because the aspects of ourselves we're trying to escape simply come along for the journey. The restlessness, the discontent, the feeling that something is missing, all get packed in our suitcase and accompany us to the new destination. I'm sharing these insights not to discourage you from ever changing where you live, but to free you from the cycle of perpetual seeking and inevitable disappointment. To help you recognize when dissatisfaction with place is actually pointing to something deeper. When the urge to escape is really an invitation to turn toward, to look more closely at the nature of your own experience. Because here's the profound possibility in all of this. When we begin to see through these illusions, even partially, our relationship with place transforms. We become more capable of appreciating where we are, even as we may choose to move elsewhere. We develop the capacity to be at home, not just in certain environments, but in our own awareness. And ultimately, this internal shift matters far more than any external change of address. These illusions of elsewhere, of circumstances, of permanence, and of separation are not personal failings. They're collective misconceptions deeply embedded in our culture. They're reinforced by advertising that promises happiness through the right purchase, by social media that showcases idealized environments, by a consumer society that profits from our perpetual dissatisfaction. Seeing through them isn't easy, but it is possible. And in doing so, we open ourselves to a fundamentally different way of experiencing where we live. So we return to where we began. The real reason you hate where you live has almost nothing to do with the place itself. What appeared at first to be a problem with your environment now reveals itself as something far more subtle and profound. A relationship between your consciousness and your surroundings, between your perception and your place, between your expectations and your experience. You see, we carry our way of seeing with us wherever we go. Like a pair of glasses we've worn so long we've forgotten they're there. These lenses, shaped by our conditioning, our past experiences, our habitual patterns of attention, color everything we perceive. They determine what we notice and what we overlook, what we appreciate and what we reject, what feels like home and what feels foreign. The real reason you hate where you live isn't about the place at all. It's about how you've learned to relate to place. The stories you tell yourself about what's wrong with here and what would be better elsewhere. The focus you place on certain aspects of your environment while filtering out others. The expectations you bring to your surroundings and the inevitable disappointment that follows when reality fails to match these expectations. This understanding points to a counterintuitive solution. Rather than continuing the search for the perfect location, what if you redirected that energy toward finding home within, toward developing a different relationship with wherever you happen to be? Not as a consolation prize when you can't change your circumstances, but as the most direct path to what you're actually seeking. A sense of rightness, of peace, of belonging, of being at home in your experience. Let me share some practical approaches for becoming more present wherever you are. Begin by simply noticing your surroundings without judgment, not cataloging what's wrong or what could be improved, not comparing this place to somewhere else, real or imagined. Just allowing your environment to be exactly as it is and observing your direct sensory experience of it. The quality of light, the textures, the sounds, the scents, the feeling of air on skin. When you find yourself slipping into familiar patterns of dissatisfaction, use this as an opportunity for inquiry rather than fuel for fantasy. Ask yourself, is this really about my environment, or is it about something else? What am I actually seeking in a different place? What quality am I hoping to experience there? Is it possible to cultivate some aspect of that quality right here, right now? These questions can help distinguish between legitimate needs for change and habitual dissatisfaction that will follow you wherever you go. To see through the illusion of elsewhere, practice being where you are, fully, completely, without reservation, not waiting for some future moment when you'll finally be in the right place to start living, not holding your life in suspension until the perfect environment manifests, but engaging deeply with what's here, finding interest, beauty, meaning in your immediate surroundings, however humble or imperfect they might appear. For the illusion of circumstances, experiment with shifting your attention. Notice how your experience of the same environment changes depending on your mental state. How a familiar room can feel completely different when you're at peace versus when you're agitated. How the same street can appear welcoming or hostile depending on your mood. This direct observation helps loosen our conviction that our experience is determined primarily by our surroundings rather than by our relationship to them. Regarding the illusion of permanence, practice embracing the changing nature of both places and your needs. Consider how your ideal environment has evolved throughout your life. What appealed to you at 20 may differ greatly from what appeals to you now. This recognition helps release the pressure to find the one perfect place that will satisfy you forever. Instead, you can make choices based on what serves your current phase of life, knowing both you and your surroundings will continue to change. To work with the illusion of separation, cultivate awareness of the continuous exchange between yourself and your environment. Notice how the quality of air affects your breathing, how the level of noise influences your thoughts, how the natural or built landscape shapes your movement and perception. This isn't about controlling these factors, but about recognizing their influence and your participation in a shared field of experience. A woman I knew lived in a small apartment next to a railway line. For years, the noise of passing trains disturbed her sleep and disrupted her concentration. She campaigned to have the train schedule changed. She installed expensive soundproofing. She complained to neighbors and authorities. Yet the trains continued, and so did her suffering. Then something shifted in her perception. Instead of hearing the trains as an intrusion, she began listening to their rhythm as a kind of music. The regular passing became a reminder to pause and breathe. What had been her biggest complaint about where she lived transformed into a peculiar source of connection and even joy. Nothing changed in her external environment. Everything changed in how she related to it. Now, you might be thinking, this all sounds well and good in theory, but my situation is different. My dissatisfaction is justified. My environment really is problematic. And perhaps it is. I'm not suggesting you should never change where you live or that external circumstances don't matter. They do. What I'm offering is a way to make those decisions from clarity rather than confusion, from wisdom rather than illusion, from a place of inner freedom rather than compulsive seeking. Here's the paradox. By fully accepting where you are, you become genuinely free to either stay or go. When your choices aren't driven by the desperate need to escape your current experience, you can make clearer decisions about what truly serves your well-being. You may still choose to move, but that choice comes from a different place. Not from the belief that happiness exists elsewhere, but from a clear recognition of what environment might better support the life you want to create. You see, home is not primarily a physical location. It's a state of consciousness, a quality of presence and connection that we can cultivate regardless of our surroundings. This doesn't mean all environments are equal, or that we shouldn't seek places that resonate with our nature. It means that the feeling we're ultimately seeking, that sense of being at home in our experience, depends far more on our internal landscape than our external one. Think about it. Awareness itself can become a dwelling place, a sanctuary we carry with us wherever we go, a foundation more stable than any physical structure. When we learn to rest in awareness, to abide in the present moment without constantly reaching for something else, something remarkable happens. We discover that what we've been searching for has been here all along. Not in the perfect environment, but in our capacity to be fully present to whatever environment we find ourselves in. Let me be clear. The journey toward inner belonging is not easy or straightforward. We don't suddenly transcend our conditioning through intellectual understanding alone. We don't immediately cease feeling dissatisfied with our surroundings just because we recognize the mechanism behind that dissatisfaction. This is a practice, a process, a gradual unwinding of habitual patterns that may have been with us for decades. There will still be days when you hate where you live, when you dream of escape, when you scroll through images of other places with a familiar longing. The difference is that you'll be able to recognize these moments for what they are. Not accurate assessments of your environment, but manifestations of an ancient human tendency to place happiness somewhere other than here. And in that recognition lies the beginning of freedom. What would it be like to make peace with where you are right now? Not forever, not perfectly, just in this moment. To allow your surroundings to be exactly as they are without wishing they were different. To feel the weight of your body on the surface supporting it. To hear the ambient sounds of your environment without labeling them as pleasant or unpleasant. To see the particular quality of light in the space where you sit. What happens when you truly arrive where you already are? I believe that we are all, in our own ways, trying to find our way home. Not to a particular address or geographic location, but to a sense of rightness in our being, a feeling of connection with ourselves and our world, a recognition that we belong here, on this planet, in this body, in this moment. And perhaps the most direct path to that belonging isn't continuing the search for the perfect place, but learning to be more fully present in the imperfect place where we already are. The real reason you hate where you live is that you haven't yet learned how to fully live where you are. And this is not a failure or a flaw. It's simply the human condition. We are all practicing this art of presence, of receptivity, of making peace with what is. All learning in our own time and in our own way that the home we seek exists not in a place, but in a way of being. Not somewhere else, but right here. Not in the future, but in this very moment.